I think of the life of a miner who must work all his day underground, where his lamplight is all that will shine there, and it's dark and it's damp all around. It is 2 or 3 miles to the coal face, and the tunnel is jagged and low, but he cannot find work on the surface, so it's down in the mines he must go.
Well, you're very welcome back to the Rigna Mining Experience, where we're joined by some more former miners now to look back on their times in the Rigna Mines, and indeed a present tour guide as well here at the Mining Experience. I'll get you to introduce yourselves, lads, to the cameras first of all. Just start by giving me your names and how long you worked in the mines.
Gerard Cullen. I'm from Giva, and I worked in Leydens for about 10 years, from the early 70s to the 84. I suppose when I started in the summertime, and Joe Currad was my fireman, and I was sent in helping Pius early, drawing off Pat the twin Gaffney from around this area. And then eventually the man on the clips got sick, so I was put out on the clips. And that was my first summer. I walked up the top mountain road in Giva, and I had a bicycle there, and I cycled down, and at the bottom of Gubber Road I went into an air shaft and into Rock Hill pit. Rock Hill, you could go from 2 sides, from the old workings to the air shaft, or from actually the Kilronan side, beside Kilronan Castle, that side. And it was quite a distance in. And
for those that would be familiar, Gerard, with Rock Hill, in more recent times when the mines closed, the entrance was very much, say, coming, as you mentioned, from Kilronan, from Cross Hill, where you would be heading up to it. Right. But there was other entrances into the mines earlier into Rock Hill. You could enter,
you see, what happened was, when they were mining, they hauled out on old workings, and they decided to put a fan outside and use it as an air shaft. So, but you could still enter that way. And when the mine was, actually was nearer to Gubber Road, the side, to go in, and then eventually they retracked back to what they called the wet hollow, and they went in to the right-hand side. So then it was easier to come from the lower side up, from Cross Hill side.
And maybe an idea people would have in their heads, and this might be from looking at the footage of mines in England and overseas, that all the miners would hop into a lift and they'd go down underground and they'd start their work. That wasn't the case here. You could have to walk a couple of miles to get into where you'd be taking out the coal.
It was mostly drift mining they done here. You followed the seam of coal in where it outcropped on the side of the mountain. And it went down or it went up. It might be sloped at some stage, but coal has a tendency to fall inwards from all sides. So when the wet hollow and Rock Hill, it was the lowest point, and there was water, and the coal was the highest. It was nearly 3 foot at one spot, but not for too long.
Yeah, it follies in.
It follies in.
It went down.
It went down, and then of course, as you rose to go out the other side, it went uphill again. But generally, it drifted in more or less the same run, unless you hit a fault. And when you hit a fault, the coal could go suddenly uphill, or could disappear, or go downhill. We didn't like faults, and we did hit faults.
Right. And Stephen, I'll let you introduce yourself here. We'll pick up on that then.
My name is Stephen Flynn from Ballyfernan. I'm an ex-miner. I spent about 7.5 years in it. I was only young at the time when I started, and it closed in 1990, so that was in the mine days. But I'd say if it hadn't closed, I'd still be in it.
Yeah.
You know.
From your experience, Stephen, of the 7.5 years, it was obviously you had well settled in at that stage. You've had other jobs since, and it's interesting to hear to say that, you know, had the stayed open, you would have stuck at it, you feel?
Yes. Oh, I'd have never left it. And especially now, as you say, I have a couple of different types of jobs since, but art was totally different, and the people were different, and you got on fierce well with the people. And even up to this day, 35 years later, you meet them and all good, and they were a lot of them were characters too. And
one of the things I've heard from a number of miners in these interviews was when it came to alternative employment after the mines, the length of the working day was something that really caught them. Did you find that in other jobs?
Oh, yeah. You're right. You know, your working day was supposed to be from 8 to 4. Now, if you got there at 8:30 and you'd have to go in and you'd sit in the line where all the men and before we'd told where to go, and you'd be chatting around there for 15 or 20 minutes, and you'd be put to your place, and you'd go in and you'd come out then after about 2 hours for a bit to eat, the piece as they say, the bit to eat, and you come out, and no, if you were there after 2:30, you wouldn't be a happy bunny.
Right.
You'd like to be gone at that time. So when you started in the new place, then you were 8 to 4, more than likely to shift. So the next week you were 4 to 12 and 12 to 8, or then you were, as I am now, I'm on 12-hour shifts. So that was a big difference. But the only thing about it, you worked hard.
You worked hard when you were there.
Yeah, you worked hard. But
And it was nearly work to pay, if you want to describe it that way. What work you did, the more you did when you were there, the more the money was at the end of it.
You were paid on piece. You were paid on so much a ton that you shoveled. Were you a shoveler? You were, Gerard.
I did, yeah.
And you got so much a ton, and then the drawer that threw out in one of the hutches, he was on so much less.
But you were governor by what was there. You went up 6 yards to your left from the road you were in, and the minor 12 yards up came down 6 yards or 5.5 metres.
You split the wall.
So you split the wall, as they call it. And when you had that half out, you had your piece, your lunch, and then you went on the opposite side. So you had 12 yards of coal by a yard deep by the height governor of the mountain. So when you crossed 7 ton, you were on price. So if you made 8, 9, 10 ton, and if you had that out at 1:30, you could head out.
You could go.
You had your day's work done.
Okay. You spoke, Gerard, about some days if there was faults and things could go wrong. What were the most frustrating things when you'd be working in the mines? What was the things that you dreaded most? Well, apart from the whole place coming down around you, but say from a logistical point of view when you'd be working, what was the big challenges?
Well, a fall, because in the mines where we worked, on top it was slate over the coal or mudstone, and that wasn't great for supporting. So that could fall. You could have a collapse, and that could be a couple of hours to fix that. Or hutches off the road, waiting for hutches to come in was a big frustration. Yeah. Coming in 2 or 3 mile of hutches, and they got stuck, and that fault had to be fixed, and then you'd go again. That could hold you up. Yeah. You'd be a bit later that day going out home. Yeah.
You had a different situation than us now. We worked in rock.
Aye. Yeah, you were in the rock, like this mine here, yeah.
Why would hutches go off the road? Would that be down to maybe new drawers starting up?
It could be a loose stone or something fell, and then the full hutches came over and met the piece, and they'd end up in the roof. And the man outside was only going by the pressure was on his thing. And if someone saw it in time, the bell wire was split in places, and you'd bell it. Yes. But if you hadn't, it would eventually the whole thing would pull and all a block.
Okay. Whereas
but like what you said. The long day, yes, it was a big difference. I left here in '84 and went to London, and it was a long day. It was 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and the man I was working for, the foreman said, "Slow down." He says, "You'll be kept." But we had the habit of working fast. Yeah. Everything was shoveled at speed. But eventually, I did slow down because the day was longer. There wouldn't be the same appreciation for your
so there was a bit of learning on the job. Was it a big decision, Gerard, to leave the mines in 1984 and to head over to the UK? And do you mind me asking why?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. A strike brewed twice here and up here in Donaghmoggy in 1984 in around September, August or September, and it brewed twice within 3 weeks. And I was then in the side road, and I had a couple of hutches of coal cut with an air pick. And Amy and Lynn came in and said, "Come out." He says, "There's a strike on again today." So I went out and I said, "This is it. I'm going. And the coal was 10 inches high, so it was very hard to work on 10 inches of coal. I had to bring 4 inches to carry my shoulders. And it wasn't hard to decide. So that was the decision, the 2 strikes in 3 weeks. I phoned a lad in London and I went over. I said, "This is it. I have enough wood."
Right. And it was a big change. How long did you spend in London?
It's been 7 years.
Right.
And I worked in tunnels and headings and timber headings, footings, underpinning, the same kind of idea.
Yes.
Shuttering, steel fixing, anything. I didn't say I wouldn't do anything.
A big difference to the mines in some ways, but similar in others.
Yeah. It was. But still, as this man said, there was great camaraderie in the mines. Well, great old crack, great old group, and I suppose you had to be that way.
Yeah.
To be in that situation.
There was never an argument.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Stephen, what was the mood like after a strike would end when people will go back in? It was forgotten about fairly quickly, and financially, was it a difficult time? It depended, I suppose, on the length of the strike.
It all depended on the length, but I wasn't there for any of the big ones, but we were there for a few little mini ones, as they say. But I remember one time there was 2 fellas that were supposed to come out early in the morning to cut a place, and they weren't the full 2 hours. They were a little bit late coming, but in fairness, when they got there, they cut it and they had it ready. But the fireman at the time, he was up that morning looking at a cow calving, and he arrived and he told them they weren't getting the 2 hours because they weren't there. And they said they have it cut, that the work done and that it cut. And he said he wouldn't get in the 2 hours. Now, it was only 2 hours to each of the 2 men. It was only 4 hours. So the men were so loyal that they stuck behind the pair of boys. And we ended up on strike for 3 days. Every man on strike for 3 days for the sake of 4 hours.
And it was the Mexican standoff that stage, wasn't
But once it was settled in, all back, and every man back and picked up the shovel and away with him again now.
I suppose there's no winner in a strike, because if you were a good few months on strike, no matter what pay rise you get, you'd never add up the difference in the amount of time you were off. But I suppose, you have to stand behind your ideals. Did you work to a derg?
What?
To a derg, they called it. But slow down. If there was a long draw on the mines and you weren't getting paid extra to draw the hutches.
No.
We done that.
There was a
and there was we slowed down, and Joe Curran said, "What's wrong?" Eventually, then they'd come and they'd give you a few shillings extra in the ton, because you were doing a lot. There was more than 100 yards of withdrawal.
A putter. We used to get a putter that time.
That was for when they hit the fault or hit the bed.
No, there was always a sort of a bit of help coming in.
Oh yeah, they could. Generally, the thing was everyone was helpful.
Then there was another time there was a man injured, and I don't know what the dispute was about, but the company wouldn't pay him for his compensation. But every man in all the mines about gave 3 days' wages, and the company matched it. And that's now you go and manage the place today to get a man to give you a few pound, alone 3 full days' wage, and 3 days' wages from the mines that time, as you were saying, you were on piece, so you were on good money.
It was a fairly substantial sum of money on it. And it brings me on, Stephen, to the question that I was going to ask you, and maybe to both of you, where you would have worked since. Did you ever get that same spirit of camaraderie, maybe the one for all in it together, in other jobs, like what would have been in the miners? Or would everyone have come out like that and gone on strike like that or supported the person? I
found in London now, when we were there, that the Irish were very helpful to each other beyond there, more so than... And if there was someone hurt or sick, we'd always have a do for them or a dance and gather money for someone that would be.
Stephen, and other places that you worked.
Well, the places I worked, you know how you're always going to have a friend or a buddy or something, or maybe 2 or 3, but you're never going to have them all. Where you'd sort of feel safe in saying that all the fellas that you worked with were your buddies, because you would have lived the place safe for the next fella. Jerry could be walking in next, and if things wasn't left safe, he could get hurt. So when he was at it, he had to do the same for maybe me coming in.
You worked as a team?
Everyone worked for themselves, because I remember 2 incidents. Myself and Terry Cullen, God be good to him, were then after cleaning up, brushing the road, we cleaned up a road, and we're sitting down having a little rest. And the next thing, the rock split, and down she fell. And I went one way, and he went the other way. And the stone landed down between the 2 of us. And we weren't able to move it. I shot it to go on it. And if the 2 of us went the one way that day, some of us would have got caught. And I was back another night. We were working days, and they wanted to shovel the straight road to drive on, because the water used to go ahead, and it went down, and the water used to go ahead with it. So I went home, and Michael Conway was shoveling it. And I knew he was in when I arrived back, because his bike was on the 50, was outside. So I arrived. So we went in, and I could see no stir from or hear no noise. So
was he was on the back shift, was it?
No, he was on the day shift. The 2 of us went back to shovel. He shoveled it, and I was drawing it.
Right.
And all the empty hutches was left in for us. So when I went in, and a flag had fallen on his legs, and the way he was thinking, he couldn't get back to put it back. So he had to wait there till I went in, and I reached in and I pulled back the flag, and he shoveled away for the rest of the evening.
And he wasn't...
No, he wasn't hurt.
He wasn't hurt.
He hadn't fair to fall, John, because you were nearly shoulder to shoulder with the roof. So it only fell down maybe that much, but it was...
Enough to hold
you. He had no place to manoeuvre.
Yeah. How would it feel after, see what you explained there with yourself and Terrence and when the rock came down, after a near miss like that, would you ever be frightened, scared to go back into it and say, well, to hell with this, maybe there's more important things in life and I might try something safer?
Well, I don't think so, because you would say at that stage you probably had a few years got, and I suppose you got used to the very good money, and then what choice had you?
Yeah.
Only, like Jerry,
Economics
go abroad.
dictated it was either that or head for the boat.
And then you were at home and you were doing a bit of farming and things like that, so, you know what I mean? So
You get hardened into it, or you get to know when there's bad roof. And
you would.
Had you any near misses, Gerard?
nothing serious, no. But you get to know. Oh, yeah, you've often seen it, like what he said, landing behind you. But if the slate, where we were working the slate was always spitting. And if it was spitting rapid, it was about to fall. Now, if it was only spitting here and there, it might never fall.
Yeah.
It could maybe 6 months' time or that type of thing.
The rockets fall.
But the rock would, yeah.
Yeah, the rocket fall.
Yeah.
Experience was the big teacher when it came. There wouldn't have been as much of an emphasis on health and safety or health and safety inspectors as on most jobs now. Experience and
Fresh air
knowledge
too.
was the big thing.
Fresh air wasn't there either. You were legally entitled to fresh air from 1962 onwards, but it wasn't in
No,
something.
it couldn't be got in.
And we tried to put up plastic and sandbags and fans and trying to put around the circle. You know, and you'd see someone smoking, and if it was lingering there, it was bad pull.
Yeah.
I think of the life of a miner who must work all his day underground, where his lamplight is all that will shine there, and it's dark and it's damp all around. It is 2 or 3 miles to the coal face, and the tunnel is jagged and low, but he cannot find work on the surface, so it's down in the mines he must go.